Hello folks, L.A. Little here with TA Today, bringing you neoclassical technical analysis on a regular basis, giving you trading ideas, setups, and thoughts about where this market is and where it's going. Let's get into it. Hey folks, last day of April, we had the Hyperscalers report last night, all four of them. You had Google, you had Amazon, both of those are up this morning. Google in particular up big. Google had the best chart coming in, and it wasn't clear that anybody would be able to benefit from it, but these numbers were blowouts on almost all measures in almost all of the companies. So Google and Amazon up, you got Meta down pretty big, and you got Microsoft down a bit as well. Altogether, MAG's about the same, right? Haven't hardly changed. Now what they did is they raised the CapEx. And that actually is pushing the SOXX up. We'll look at all of these a little bit in detail here as we go through the morning. But let's start with the futures here. This was the close last night. So you closed right here, right? Pushed all the way down to here as those earnings started to come out. And then in the after hours, once things got going, right, this thing just took off, right? Presses all the way up, right at highs, new highs, and then drops like a rock. Now what caused that? Well, there was this little push that started to take place in oil, and it just kept going. And I think that was a big part of what happened here, driving this back down. You got the NASDAQ futures over here, the NDX, basically the same story. I would note that on the way back here, this was the first push up, once the earnings started to really come out, right? Same thing here. This one is just slightly over at this point. This is the ES minis, the S&P. NASDAQ went on up to make much higher highs, right, and still is a little bit below it. So NASDAQ is if you will, kind of trailing here this morning pre-market in terms of the performance relative to the S&P 500. Now, if we go to the oil market, the oil market just took a nice little dump here. I've said before, I think the oil is probably, done. But then again, you got this Middle East thing that keeps going and it doesn't change. Oil is up here making highs. Now, we actually traded on the futures contract at the time up to 120, after hours way back here on this time period. But this was like, I think it was 8th of March or so. But oil again trying to top out here again when you look at it on a daily chart. So we'll see how that finishes out today. But oil is a variable. Another big variable is interest rates. And we'll go to those in just a second. But I want to show the S&P 500. The top up here, 71.78. We're trading right at 72 on the futures. That's going to be right at the highs. If you look at it on the NDX, right, the NDX is actually setting up a push higher, but it too has the same problem in that it is right at the top and it's actually not getting over it yet, at least not pre-market. Is sitting right up here. And so, the general question is, can this create another leg up, right? Well, technically it should pull back and test. These swing point highs should pull back and test. These down here are gold if it ever comes down that deep, right? These are like automatic buys down at 25.5. But, is it going to get back there? Well, I don't know, because this thing's pretty strong. It doesn't want to get back there. Matter of fact, if you take the lows of these, 25.6, 24.4, that would get you back into this area. So, if we ever get, and it's hard to say if you're going to or not, but if we ever get a full test of these, which would be not, improbable, then that would be a test of this area, and that's a buy. And so that's what you really would like to see. But right now, this market just doesn't want to come in. Let's go over and look at the SOXX. Well, actually, let's look at interest rates first. Here's interest rates. Now, it's not a huge problem until it gets to 4.5. And then that becomes kind of the critical area where things start to break. You got a new Fed, chairman coming in. You had Fed yesterday basically did nothing except for he had a lot of dissent on the board, which was kind of interesting. Powell's going to stay as a Fed governor, which means he'll take away one of the seats that Trump wants to appoint. But anyway, interest rates coming back up to this 4.5 level is an issue, and got a pretty big spike yesterday. We'll see what they do today, but that would be something I'd keep my eyes on. And then finally, let's look at the SOXX, and then we'll quickly look at each of these players. Here's the SOXX. Now the SOXX had the gap up, not the gap up, but the gap down, leaving kind of an island reversal. Well, they started to close that yesterday, and so that's not in play anymore. The real question is, can they get the new highs and continue on, or are you going to see some range? I would expect the range. I'm a little more conservative in my expectations, but that's what I would expect here. They had a CapEx guide, as I said, that's going to help, but at the same time, again, you had a huge run. This is 30-something% in 4 weeks, right? It's crazy. Big moves. Let's go look at each of the hyperscalers and see what their charts look like. Now, I'll start with, once I get them up here, find my mags. I'll start with the Google, because that was the strongest of the three. Google made a nice run. It was right up here testing these highs, trying to break, and it's going to break as of today unless something major happens. Here's the breakout on a daily. You can see it here. You're going to have a breakout on a weekly there. You're not extended anywhere, and you have targets up higher. Targets at 372, 379, 359. I think it's going to go hit those targets. If we look at the other that's doing best, Amazon. Amazon actually has already broke last week. You can see that here, right? Broke there, and so you had a multiple swing point breakout, and it's breaking out on a monthly, even though it's not a swing point high. Nothing extended here. Got a target of 300. I don't know if it's going to get there right away, but it's going to try and creep up there eventually. Microsoft's on the other side of the boat in that it's been weak, had a big spike up when everything else spiked, but Microsoft is just consolidating now. It's in this consolidation range. It's got a lot of work to do to get back to the highs, and I don't know if it's going to do it anytime soon. Microsoft, I think, is a buy if it comes back into this area, somewhere around 395, 400. And then finally, Meta, which is the weakest performer this morning, down about 8%. Consolidation here, looks like they're going to come back down and test into this area, the 629 area at least. I wouldn't be that interested in buying them unless they get back into this lower area. But even there, probably just a, kind of a bounce trade. You got a place here that they could get support around 600, which is where I was just pointing out. So all the hyperscalers, raised CapEx, all doing great. Amazing numbers, actually. We've got a huge backlog for future, compute. And that's going to keep them investing in building out infrastructure. So AI infrastructure, it's not done. That's where we're at. Have a great one. I'll see you next time.